This is the best of First and Last, the podcast.
Mike Golic Jr., Will Reeve here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. A lot of moving and shaking in the NBA right now, and you asked a good question before the show, and I want to ask you here. Between anything that might happen leading up to or involving the draft and anything that might happen in free agency, is there anything that you think can get anyone else in the NBA over the Warriors or anyone else in the East over the Cleveland Cavaliers going forward here?
I think the snap answer is no, because the Warriors are, as Joe Lacob prematurely said last year, light years ahead of the rest of the league. He can now say that with certainty, that the Warriors are light years ahead of the rest of the league. And my question pre-show was, what would a team, my example was the Cavs, because they are, of course, the closest to the Warriors and they are the class of the East. What would the Cavs or any other team have to do between right now, today, and opening tip of game one in the fall to get to a place that is contends with the Warriors? And then the other question is, what could a team who's not the Cavs do in this offseason to vault themselves into that first spot in the East? And the snap answer is nothing. The answer is no. There is nothing to be done. The Cavs are so much better than the rest of the East, and the Warriors are so much better than the rest of everybody else, that it doesn't really matter all these pieces moving around. Whatever happens in the draft, there's been some trades, there's been some speculation about different players going different places, and then free agency, of course. But it all doesn't really matter, even if Paul George somehow moves from the Pacers this offseason and changes the landscape before he ultimately goes to where he says he's going to go after 2018, the Los Angeles Lakers.
Yeah, so that's the news coming off the weekend. Is first we had it break that the 76ers and the Boston Celtics were going to swap those picks there. The Sixers at 3 move up to 1. The Celtics move back and get some other future assets for there. Danny Ainge continues to stack those future chips for that team, continues to have assets on a team that was also the 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. We know that was a little bit faux, but
still happens.
Still operating from a place of success, as opposed to the Sixers, who have built through the process now very famously in the Sam Hinkie model, albeit without any of that on-court winning to accompany and supplement it like that. And then the even bigger news from yesterday was that Paul George letting the Indiana Pacers know that he is going to opt out next summer, going to become a free agent, and by all accounts intends to be a Los Angeles Laker, which the first aspect of that is what a savage blow to the Indiana Pacers. And what they're trying to accomplish as a team.
What are they trying to accomplish?
Well, by being able to get something for Paul George on the way out. So you know now that he's going to leave, what leverage do you have to operate now trying to trade him before? Because they have to try and deal him before next summer, or they're going to walk away and get nothing from him.
Yeah, you'll get pennies on the dollar. I think that before this George news came out over the weekend, I think a lot of people made the somewhat lazy but also obvious for a reason, they floated the idea of the Cavs moving someone like Kevin Love to the Pacers and bringing Paul George back to the Cavs. And my opinion there is that swap makes the Cavs either just as good as they've been or a little bit better. I still don't think that vaults them into direct blow for blow just as good as the Warriors. LeBron and Paul George on the same team obviously would be great, with Kyrie as the third member of that new retooled Big Three. But LeBron and Paul George do a lot of the same things well. So maybe it's a bit redundant. They still need a rim protector there. That seems to be a deficiency for the Cavs, among others. I mean, everything you do against the Warriors makes you look deficient.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate measuring stick that they've got there coming from the Western Conference.
Right, because the Cavs don't measure themselves against anyone else in the East, as we saw by them not tanking the second half of the season, but really not seeming to care. They just sort of geared up for the playoffs, which was just gearing up for the finals against the Warriors. That's who they compare themselves to. But if you're the Pacers, yeah, you're hamstrung here by the fact that Paul George has told you, to his credit, he's been honest. He said to the Pacers organization, look, I'm going to leave. Here, like I'm letting you know, there will be no surprises. This will not be LeBron at the 11th hour going back to the Cavs and surprising Pat Riley, or previous to that, the decision surprising everyone by leaving the Cavs in the first place and going to the Heat. Paul George is tipping his hand here, which is a noble move from a personal standpoint from Paul George to say, look, I'm going, but at the same time, you kind of wish he kept that to himself if you're the Pacers, because then you'd at least have the leverage to get rid of him for something. For another team who thought that Paul George getting him would be a coup.
Someone who disagrees with the what you reference as the easy assumption of Paul George to the Cavaliers for some sort of commodity was Antoine Walker, former NBA player who was on the locker room this weekend and talked about why that move didn't make sense for the Pacers.
Paul George is going to be very difficult to get over there. Obviously, I'm sure LeBron would love to have Paul George. I don't necessarily believe that Cleveland's that far away. I mean, people can disagree with me. I looked at the games. I just think they're one player possibly away, a guy that can give LeBron a break. If I'm the Pacers, if I'm going to lose, if Paul George agent calls and says, look, Paul's not going to re-sign with you, he wants to go, I am picking up the phone and I am calling Danny Ainge. That's the phone call I'm making. I'm not calling the Cleveland Cavaliers.
First and last, Mike Golic Jr., Will Reeve here on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. A Straight Talk brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. Straight Talk Wireless, nationwide coverage on America's largest and most dependable 4G LTE networks. Worth knowing in the agent realm, by the way, Paul George's agent represents D'Angelo Russell and Julius Randle, who are already on the Lakers. So as people look for, reasons why that landing spot would be appealing. Obviously, we know some guys are just drawn to playing in those big markets.
He's from there too.
So that certainly adds into it. And then you throw this, what power that agent and those guys would be able to wield, all being under the same umbrella in that one spot. But Antoine Walker, now that a little dated, knowing what we know about the talks that have started between Indiana and Cleveland. I think it was Dave McMenamin, our own ESPN Cavaliers reporter here, who mentioned that line had been thrown out by the Pacers to the Cavs to kind of gauge interest in what they'd be willing to move.
Well, Walker also went on to say that he didn't think that Indiana would be interested in a Kevin Love for Paul George swap, which may have changed now in light of the new news where George significantly diminished his own trade value, possibly tactically.
Yeah, there's
tactfully works too, with tact.
Yeah, and something along those lines. It was close.
Well done, Dan Z.
It's close enough for 410, Dan. We won't actually hold your feet to the flame on that one
yet.
But yeah, there is that like really outside idea that maybe that was done by design, because if you want to go that route, that he purposely lowered his value so that another team wouldn't have to give up assets. There's only one team that makes sense for that. And it's Cleveland, because they have nothing to give up. They have no young players. They have no draft picks stockpiled.
I mean,
they're already mashed up over the cap at this point.
You don't think that the Pacers would be down for a Paul George for Kyle Korver, Darren Williams, Derek Williams, Richard Jefferson, Channing Frye, poo-poo platter?
Yeah, I don't think the 2009 All-Star platter bundled together would probably do much for them. And the Kevin Love swap becomes the easiest one, I think, because you mentioned Kyrie, Paul George, and LeBron. I think LeBron's game is diverse enough to where he can adjust to who's on the court with him. He's going to be able to make that work, because even though they play the same position, LeBron's basically been that point forward for them for the longest time. So he's going to be able to integrate someone as talented as Paul George, but you just wait and see now, is that enough? We hear they need wing defense. They need another guy that can be a consistent scorer for them. He seems to check all those boxes. And then the one thing is you hear the rent-a-player model, because if the ultimate landing spot is L.A., can they do enough in a year to dissuade him by having success? Because I feel like anything short of a championship, you leave yourself a little bit open. Like if they were to go and win a title, I don't know if Paul George is going to be like, you know what, need to jump ship right away. This probably isn't the spot for me.
Right, yeah.
But anything beyond that is just the Cavs being where they've already been.
That's putting a lot of pressure, though, on that one season for them to win. But I think that might be the model that best suits the Cavs, is like, let's just retool year by year. Much like LeBron James has sort of reinvented the star player supermax model where they take a lot of money for not so many years so they can just keep maximizing their value. Maybe the Cavs adopt that model. They say, you know what, we're just going to build the best team we can year to year to fight the Warriors until the Warriors ultimately, disband in however long that's going to be. But why not just keep trying year by year just to take a swing at the champs in a new form every year, however you can?
Also worth noting in this whole process that the Cavs have a really interesting front office situation of their own while they're trying to make all these deals. David Griffin's still on that lame duck deal. Nothing has moved forward there, so puts this all in a really odd spot for them as well as negotiations go down.
First and last, the podcast.
Your 2017 U.S. Open champion, not Ricky Fowler. And boy, did ESPN.com want to let us know it. Looking on those sites, and listen, congratulations to Brooks Koepka, who won the 2017 U.S. Open. He's the 7th straight first-time major winner that we've had in this run, which is an impressive stretch. I think the first time we've seen that since a run between 2010 and 2012 in a similar fashion. And it was a great win for him. Played out of his mind, was bombing the ball, averaged like 320 off the tee, was crushing fairways, barely missed greens the whole weekend. Played that complete round, especially on Sunday where the weather conditions changed a little bit. I think the average was about 2 over on that round. So you had a lot more guys, including Ricky Fowler, having tough days as opposed to Koepka, who just kept on going. No pun intended. So then you log on to .com this morning, and the first title you see is Ricky Fowler came up short at this U.S. Open, so what's new? You click on the article, and as Will explained to us during the break, this is a pun off the idea that the U.S. Open is a major.
I want to make sure you guys are with it.
So just
get it.
Go into that with that in mind.
I'm priming you.
The headline, Ricky Fowler is a major disappointment.
Do you get it?
Do you get it? Do you?
Like, he's been disappointing in majors because he hasn't won one, even though he's had 6 top 5 finishes now.
Yeah, so Will's got you guys covered on the pun inside the joke, but the larger portion, or the larger meaning of the article, and they talk about, they preface it by saying the reason to be critical of Ricky isn't because of the fame that's always been attached to him as a young golfer, which in most cases, I would argue, is never really a bad thing to be famous as long as you're putting in the work. They hint at a conversation that he had with his swing coach, Butch Harmon, at the end of last year, which indicates that might have been an issue at some point, though.
Yeah, because we don't see the work these guys put in, the proverbial shots they're putting up at the gym, the swings they're taking on the range and all that stuff. These guys do work very hard. They make it look so easy, and any of us who have picked up a golf club know how basically impossible golf is. So when we watch these guys, and they're doing these unbelievable things, and we watch tournaments like the U.S. Open and are rooting for the fescue to overtake everybody because it brings these pros back down to earth or closer to our level where we're like, oh, I could, 8-putt on this car hood of a green, or I could take 10 whacks in the rough and barely get the ball out. And that didn't happen this weekend. -16 was the final score for Koepka. That ties, I believe, Rory McIlroy's record of a -16 in 2011 when he won. And then Tiger Woods was -12. Ricky Fowler's -10 would have won him any other U.S. Open in the past decade or so, or maybe ever.
It's besides that one, and then the Tiger Woods Open win from around then, and Rory's Open win.
Yeah, right. So low scores at the U.S. Open, obviously rare. Ricky obviously has the talent to win a major, and I think that's the issue we take with it, is that we see him doing all the young, good-looking, famous athlete stuff, and it looks like a lot of fun. Those spring break boys things that he does with Spieth,
yep, they've
and
got
Justin
their young
Thomas
golfers
and Smiley
rat
Kaufman.
pack of sorts,
and it looks awesome. And now he has a girlfriend, but it's sort of been a running joke that he's been the single guy, sort of running around doing whatever he wants, living the Playboy life, living the life that a lot of us would want to live if we could. I know that I would sign up for it in a heartbeat.
Living the life that his swing coach Butch Harmon said. They had that conversation at the end of last year. Butch Harmon's quote was, "You've got to decide, are you going to be a Kardashian or are you going to be a golf pro?"
Just dragging the Kardashians through everything. They show up in every sport. They are the comparison that everybody makes, and like that's the point.
But you're talking about them.
Right, of course, and that's the point. And the point that I was going to make is that we see all that stuff. We see what Ricky wants us to see in terms of his off-the-course, I'm not going to call them antics, but his off-the-course activities. And that, to us, we can easily say as observers, like, oh, he doesn't care, he's not trying that hard, or like he's just getting by on talent alone. But that quote from Butch Harmon suggests, okay, well, maybe what we're seeing and what's actually happening is aligned more than we think, because we do not see these guys at the range at all hours. We do not see them working out in the gym. We don't see them going over film and really poring over the technique and the mechanics of a golf swing, because it is so precise and technical. Doing all these things that are required of you to become a golfer at the most elite level. We don't see them doing any of that, but we just know that it's there because we see the results at the tournaments in terms of their skill, and we see Ricky's skill. But apparently, according to this quote from Butch Harmon in the article from Keith Van Valkenburg on ESPN.com, maybe Ricky wasn't putting in the work that he needed, and now apparently he has been, and that still hasn't been enough to get him over the hump and win a major. And I think that's why, all puns aside, he's been a major disappointment.
Well, part of it, I guess, is the reason we hate on him for his famous attitude is probably we feel like he hasn't earned it, right? We want our athletes to win before they celebrate or before they go out and get famous.
Yeah.
But the second point would be, do we really think it's that Ricky needs a little more range time or a little bit more time pouring over his swing to go from top 5 to winning, or that there's just some randomness in the game of golf in one tournament, and the difference between winning a major and not winning a major could be the time of day you play or whatever else comes with golf.
Yeah, golf is such an interesting animal like that, in that it is very results based, the way like a lot of other sports, I guess. But there is such a degree of randomness. I mean, we've had 7 first-time major winners
in the last 7
majors. And even across sports, usually, especially in team sports, which is so different, but even in individual sports, we usually see, whether it comes to tennis or swimming or all these other venues, usually see the dominant performers consistently rise to the top in those veins. And there's just so much that can happen in the sport of golf that judging him based on that one, this was his 6th top 5 major finish, which I feel like is a level of consistency that should be more of a marker than merely holding up whatever trophy it is. This one you get a medal too, which is also kind of interesting, as far as just deciding that all of a sudden you get a medal for this tournament
in addition to your trophy.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of hard work coming home on this in this vein, but it just seems like to judge critically, especially for a guy that's also just 28 years old.
He's got time.
He's got time. He could easily rattle off an unparalleled run and vault himself into a completely different conversation. But alas, we sit here and we get to read off punny headlines coming up this morning.
First and last.
Talked about Paul George making it clear to his current team, the Pacers, that he's going to be on the move next summer. He's going to opt out, become a free agent then. Sort of Bigfoot, and what was already big news coming off the weekend leading up to the draft. We'd heard so much about Lonzo Ball and Father's Day commercials and Markelle Fultz and the Celtics and this number 1 pick that they had held on to for so long that apparently they weren't all that keen on keeping, and decided that they were going to go ahead and, it appears by our sources, agree to swap top picks with the Philadelphia 76ers in something that NBA Brian Windhorst on the NBA Lockdown Insiders podcast called a huge risk for the Celtics.
If you're Danny Ainge, you better hope that Markelle Fultz doesn't win Rookie of the Year and look like he's a future and perennial All-Star. Because if you pass on a guy who's going to be a franchise player, it will stick with you forever. That's why we never see the number 1 pick get traded. That's why it hasn't happened in 24 years. It may not happen for 24 more, because the danger that you face as a general manager, as an organization, of doing this is really, really high. The chance of you being made to a fool is significant. And that's why I got to believe there's something else going on here, because to do that and put yourself out there like that, you've really got to have what you're doing nailed down.
So, Will Reeve, you hear that this swap is announced this weekend, and your first thought is what?
This is fun.
All right, good place to start. You're right, especially in the wake of the Golden State Championship where we all felt kind of hopeless.
Yeah, like drama, intrigue. I'm super down with the process. I find Joel Embiid to be highly entertaining, and what the Sixers have done, whatever your opinion on tanking, I find them very interesting. I'm really excited to see Ben Simmons come into play. Joel Embiid hopefully has a full healthy year, and then now with them taking Fultz at number one by all accounts, like, they could be a fun team. Like, Fultz will complete them in terms of the position players that they need. And if the Sixers are good, especially considering that they're in the same division as the Celtics, and the Celtics just gave them this pick, and to Brian Windhorst's point, like, you better hope if you're the Celtics, especially if you're Danny Ainge, that Fultz is a bust, because if he's not, then you look like an idiot. Or you better hope that whomever you take, looking like it could be Josh Jackson, you better hope that he takes you, and the way that your team is constructed on opening day in the fall takes you to the level that you can beat the Cavaliers in the Eastern Conference and make it to the finals, because that's the only way that you'll really be determined to success, by passing up on that first pick. And Ainge is getting ready or trying to extend the window or open the window further for the Celtics to have sustained success, which I'm cool with. So those are my initial thoughts, but really boiled down to its essence is this is a lot of fun, because we've talked about last week and basically all year is super teams. The Cavs and the Warriors, super teams. And this, like, now is a little more organic, fun, intrigue. It takes some brains to sort of work your way through the weeds of who's going to go where and what's going to happen. And I like the intrigue, and I'm also just rooting for chaos, and this seems to be a bit chaotic.
Well, if you do like that intrigue, the NBA draft is on ESPN. Coverage starts at 7 p.m. Eastern on Thursday night on ESPN TV and the ESPN app, so you can check that out there. And overall, draft-wise, you're right. I think it does a lot. There's been a lot of intrigue in general this year. Lonzo Ball's been a huge headline for a lot of reasons, but the debate of where he, Markelle Fultz, De'Aaron Fox, and some of these top prospects fall in the draft order is up for debate in a way that we usually don't see with the lottery picks. Every year in and year out, we usually have a little bit better understanding of clear-cut ones and guys on down the list. So there's some intrigue there, but you're right. It feels a little more like an event, sort of akin to the NFL draft this year, in the way we look forward to it shifting the balance of power in a few of these ways, because Boston's a team that, you know, we think can, in some ways, compete. They're competitive enough. I made the comparison between them and the Sixers a little bit before, in the fact that they've both been stacking assets for a while and, you know, been honing the process. It's just that one side has done it from a place of success. The Boston Celtics overachieved this last year, and you can credit whoever you want in that one. You can credit Brad Stevens. You can credit Danny Ainge for having some foresight and putting together some competent pieces, albeit guys that probably are just all a tick below that superstar status.
Yeah.
But at the very least, he's still made a competitive team there. So this move becomes interesting, because we always talk about with teams with assets, at some point you got to turn those into players. And
yeah, you can only be hypothetical for so long.
But part of you feels like, especially in a LeBron James-dominated East, that if you do a move like this, you sort of buy yourself a little time. I haven't staked myself to one high-profile, hopeful superstar just yet. We're holding out for, you know, insert next guy here coming up in the next draft or the draft after that. So you buy yourself a little time artificially.
Yeah. Also, if you're a Celtics fan, rather, you got to be rattled that all this talk, you had the Nets pick for so long and everyone was getting so excited about it, and finally it falls into place that you do have the number one pick, which is the rich getting richer in a way. Yeah, you're playing against the Cavs in the East, but you were the number one seed as the Boston Celtics, and now you get the number one pick. You're adding the first pick to the one seed. Like, you're in heaven if you're a Celtics fan. You're feeling this is the thing, and like, even though 1 and 3, yeah, there may be a bit of a difference in the quality of player. Like, those are still high picks. You're still getting an asset to your team that is more likely than not going to turn into a player. But I think there's just the stigma of having the first overall pick. As Brian Windhorst mentioned, there hasn't been a first overall pick traded in 24 years because it is so valuable and because there is so much on the line in terms of legacy and in terms of future success for your franchise. So if you're a Celtics fan, you got to be pretty bummed, even if you can talk yourself into the logistics of the deal working out better for your team in the long run.
Yeah.
In terms of getting assets back, drafting a player that's a better complement for the roster you already have, like all that stuff. I get it. I just think if you're a Celtics fan trying to get ratchet up for this draft, you're a little bit bummed. It's anticlimactic. Like, oh, we gave away the number 1 pick we were so excited about for so long, and that Ainge didn't give away at the deadline this year to try to make his team competitive for a title within the season. He sort of just gave it away after it was all said and done.
Remember a couple months ago when they released that the NBA awards wouldn't come out until late June?
Yeah.
You guys even care anymore?
No, not really.
I didn't care ever.
Although, weirdly enough, I think this might accomplish something that we talked about as a potential fix for the MVP race.
What's
so
up?
we talked about for the MVP, I remember we had the debate on this show talking about how the regular season MVP, should it take into account some of postseason play? And I remember, I think it was Rachel Nichols who suggested that we just make the finals MVP more of a priority. Mission accomplished.
Yeah.
We handed out the finals MVP well before we handed out the regular season. The regular season MVP will almost feel like a consolation prize now, because we know on the biggest stage when he needed to, Kevin Durant got it done in a big way for his team in the performance and the place that we seem to wait the most out of all this. And then probably ironically enough, after in June now for this award, Russell Westbrook, his former teammate, is going to win it. And we're all going to recognize, well, that was a great regular season. It was historic, but it was still something that didn't translate into success in the places that we deem relevant.
And we already, as you guys know, devalue the NBA regular season. Does this then devalue it even more when we see Westbrook ultimately win it and we kind of go, great?
Yeah, because all those awesome things he was doing that we cared about so much as it was happening, sort of tuning in to see if he would score another triple-double throughout the season as one of the only interesting components of this regular season. It was like 2 months ago now that he was doing all this stuff. I kind of forgot about it. It was cool, but I was more interested in seeing Durant go off for 30-plus every game in the finals, and now we're on to the draft, and then it's the middle of the summer, and let's look forward to next year already.
Yeah,
huh?
It's this weird thing where we take the greatness of the top-tier teams, the Cavaliers, the Warriors, and the regular season for granted, and we watch these singular performances from James Harden and Russell Westbrook and these guys who were at the forefront of the MVP race. And now we've got that shift in the postseason where we understand that cream is going to rise to the top. We get all those important players. I'm here for this paradigm shift.
Do you think, though, that this will increase the rest? Because, again, now we're devaluing individual regular season performances just as much as we have with teams.
So what do you mean?
Yeah,
what do you mean?
I think that ship has sailed. I think there's always going to be a part of us that values that MVP. There's when we go back to games next year, that'll be one of the bullet points for Russell Westbrook, is it'll be Russell Westbrook reigning MVP of the league. We won't say reigning finals MVP in that way, maybe but a few times for Kevin Durant. So it might take a while for that to take hold overall, but I still think the ship has sailed. For anyone that's going to value meaningful basketball in the postseason, they've already made that ship. We see how the game goes for that now.
And essentially, we talk so much about legacy in the NBA. That's what this really matters the most for, is when looking back on James Harden's career, Russell Westbrook's career, whoever else's career, it's going to matter years from now when we're doing that if they won an MVP or not. It matters less now, I think, than it will years down the road.
And I think that's okay. I said I think there's part of that I do agree with, because the NBA is one place where postseason success kind of can and should bleed into what we look for in that award, because it's a place where stars can so singularly affect the outcome of games for their team, albeit now in a league full of super teams, we know you kind of need to bundle a few of them together.
First and last.
So in college sports, when you get around bowl season, Will, you've got a lot of free time after final exams have gotten done.
Is that bowl SZN?
Yes, bowl season.
Okay, got
season, as the kids would say these days. And you've got a lot of free time where you're on campus with not a lot to do. And in an effort to keep you from doing anything you're not supposed to, the coaches institute what we used to call forced fun, which are these team bonding activities. Mm-hmm. Like they bust everyone and we go see a movie in South Bend, or go bowling, or hit go-karts.
Nice.
Or something sweet like that.
That is sweet, epic, bro.
That we would just refer to as forced fun. And it was just an effort for, run-of-the-mill team building that we all could have accomplished on
Keep
our own.
you off the streets, as it were.
Yeah, they wanted to keep us from doing anything wrong. And so this slot, kind of every day in our radio program ends up becoming our spot, not necessarily forced fun, but scheduled fun.
I have fun during every segment with you.
That's fine. That's not necessarily true for the right. No, I'm just kidding. But
you couldn't even finish the chirp right there.
No,
you said just kidding. You bailed early.
Yeah, I know.
Like that blimp pilot.
I should have let that one sit. And so we got up to here, and I have full disclosure. I have a list in my phone. I filled in on the Dan Lebitard show with Stu Gatz a couple of times. I also do weekend observations with Stu Gatz every weekend, which oddly enough, I can't get rid of Dan Z. He's like a bad penny. He just follows me around, and I come into work this weekend on weekend observations, and I look up, and Devin Kane, who's our producer on that show, says we got someone filling in APing on the show, Mike Uranaga, who has like 1 million kids, was off tending to them on Father's Day, and I said, all right, well, who's guest APing on the show? He said, oh, it's Dan Z. You can imagine my shock and dismay.
I became a superstar, like overnight.
Oh, my God.
You have now 537
No,
Twitter
we're
followers?
not going down the Dan Z Twitter
We won't.
rabbit hole.
Actually-
Well, what defines a superstar?
Hold on. He brought something else up, and since we're in scheduled fun, Mike Uranaga taking Father's Day off, I'm also against adults taking their birthdays off of work.
I can understand taking Father's Day off, though. Like, that's a scheduled day to be with your family.
It's a Sunday as well.
Your birthday is relatively meaningless after the age of 21.
True.
I can argue there's really no birthday of value from there on.
All right, rank the holidays, throwing your birthday in there that it's acceptable to take off of work.
Well, I've always felt strongly that my birthday should be a national holiday, and one day it will be. So I got to go birthday number 1, Christmas number 2, Thanksgiving number 3.
You would go birthday number 1?
No, just to be a contrarian.
Oh, okay.
It's Thanksgiving then Christmas for me.
I would go Christmas.
Hold on. Thanksgiving then Christmas?
Yeah, not to be corny, but I just love the fact, like, when your family all gets together and it's just like 4 days of just family and food and booze. It's like just
Wimpy party horn.
Why wimpy party horn? I rage on Thanksgiving, bro. Yeah, that's my Thanksgiving. We have a talent show.
Talent show?
Yeah, it's pretty epic.
You have a talent show?
I don't perform because I am untalented, but I cheer very hard and stay hydrated.
Oh, stay properly hydrated.
Yeah,
Rage it up. Rage all you want.
That's fully allowed on Thanksgiving. I actually think the more important day to take off. What is it? Is it the day of Thanksgiving or the night? Oh, it's the night before.
No,
Thanksgiving.
the night before.
The
Wednesday night when everyone, like, if you're spending Thanksgiving at home,
it's the big
you
night.
You gotta
out.
go out at the bar or like get together with your high school friends or family that you haven't seen. That's when it gets lit.
But you don't have to take that day off. That's why it's so great, because everyone has the next day off.
I
so
had
you
to work. I had to work here. I did Sports Center on Thanksgiving this past year.
Ooh, congratulations.
Thanks, guys. This is cool. Yeah, I guess that was a humble brag. I went to my job.
Cool.
Sorry, I have a cool job. That I won't apologize for.
Cool.
Actually.
Yeah, no, it's great. We're all tremendously
very lucky.
We're all tremendously proud of you. I had that Thanksgiving off. I had Thanksgiving off for the first time in years, because usually we were practicing or something or getting ready for Thanksgiving in that vein. But
so which day?
Thanksgiving would be 2 for me. Christmas is the easy number 1 for me. Thanksgiving is number 2. Outside of that, like at this point in my life where I sit, I would probably just value the holidays where the night off or the night out requires a night off the next day. Like
Right.
St. Patrick's Day would be another one I would throw in there for that vein. That's another co-opted big drinking holiday.
Yeah, but see, St. Patrick's Day to me feels like a forced fun holiday. It's like, dude, sweet, you drink beer, you're the man. That's
Yeah,
sort of,
exactly. It's an excuse as an adult too, because once you get out of college, again, those become fewer and further between. It's not like college where, oh, it's Wednesday, let's go out. Why not? Because we're in college, we're young, nothing can ever hurt us.
nothing does hurt you, man. Like,
No, it's great.
it's 4 years of a black hole. Like, you just everything, nothing counts. I mean, you played sports, which is sweet, but
Well, I mean, technically after that, nothing counted either, thanks to the NCAA. So.
ooh,
Penn State
sweet burn.
invented a holiday because the brass would schedule our spring break to coincide with St. Patrick's Day on some tactical move.
Oh,
That is,
yeah.
I mean, that is from an administrative standpoint, it's smart.
Okay,
but
but here's why
I don't like taking administrative standpoints.
Here's why
so I'm
it didn't
here.
work. Penn State started doing the Saturday before.
Yep.
Nice.
And they called it State Patty's Day.
Let's go.
And it got so big that kids from other schools would come because it got well known as and it was dangerous. Like they canceled it. They forced bars to close.
Ooh.
Wow.
Because it was
I thought this was America.
That is seismic.
Well, it was dangerous. That's the only way I can describe it. I've got some stories I don't know if I can tell on the air.
My grandfather got kicked out of Penn State for going on a panty raid back in the 50s.
Wow.
Yeah. It used to be co-ed single-sex dorms.
Yeah, some of our places.
Cool.
It was cool.
Some of us still have single-sex dorms. Shout out to Notre Dame on that one.
It's Catholic school, though. That
Single-sex dorms, parietals, all that good stuff.
Parietals? Wow.
Oh, yeah,
What's
parietals.
it, boarding school?
Parietals, essentially.
God,
What is
thank
that?
God I turned down that scholarship to be
Parietals.
quarterback at Notre Dame.
I don't know what that is.
So parietals are...
It's like a conjugal visit, basically.
Yeah, well, it essentially limits the other
It's
sex's
prison.
presence in your dorm after certain hours. So during the week, guys had to be out of girls' dorms, girls had to be out of guys' dorms before midnight, and on the weekends it was 2 a.m.
How do you police that?
RAs, rectors, all
Do
that
they
stuff.
check, knock on your door?
Listen.
Was there a 3 feet on the floor rule? Prop the door open with the garbage can?
Like, it was one of those things, just don't get caught. Don't be that
I'm in the.
caught.
It's better to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission. School in that regard.
All right, so we've got in that. Yes, listen.
Just for having them over, nothing. You just to clarify.
3 feet on the ground, et cetera, et cetera. So you would go in the wildly psychopathic move to bother everyone. You would go birthday, Thanksgiving, Christmas. I would
actually go Thanksgiving, Christmas, birthday.
I'm going Christmas, Thanksgiving, St. Patrick's Day, every other holiday, birthday. Dan Z is going.
Christmas, Thanksgiving are the only acceptable answers.
Only acceptable answers on that one. So, long story short, Mike Uranaga, Dan Z, not a fan of your decision.
First and last, the podcast.
We rage on into the morning, and the big news over the weekend we thought was going to be as simple as trades getting moved around, as simple as trades moving around.
Simple for us.
Leading up to the NBA draft right here on ESPN coming up this Thursday, and we will get to that. But a high-profile NBA superstar made some waves this weekend by very publicly alerting his team of his plans for the future. Paul George of the Indiana Pacers tells the Pacers that he will opt out next summer and become an unrestricted free agent in a move that puts his team in a bind. He's made it very clear that Los Angeles is the end game for him, and in that process has taken his team and really put them in a compromised position now, because what do you do if you're Pacers when everyone knows that your guy is not going to be on your team if left to his own devices leading up to the summer? So you have to move him before then. You're not going to move him to the Lakers, who aren't going to trade for him, and everyone else is sitting there taking, all right, we've got this 1-year rental player. What are we going to do? It seems that there's only one team that really makes sense in all this.
And would that be a team with LeBron James on it?
That would seem to be one Cleveland Cavaliers, and it becomes interesting. Even looking at that, like, do you think the Cleveland Cavaliers, the logical swap there would be Kevin Love, puts them in a better place than they would otherwise be, knowing they're going to have to probably give him up in the process? I don't think you can keep Love, Kyrie, and LeBron and still get Paul George for anything on the Cavs roster, because they have nothing asset-wise.
No,
to trade.
you would actually have to play, if you're the Cavs, if you wanted to keep Love, keep Kyrie, and add Paul George, you would have to trade every other player on your roster and just play 4-on-5. I still think the Cavs would win the East with those four playing 48 minutes a game against 5 other players on any other roster, but that's not going to happen. So, hypothetical over. If you're Paul George, or if you're a Pacers fan, or if you're the Pacers, or if you're anybody really, there's 2 ways to look at this. One, you could say, I guess it was noble of Paul George to be upfront and honest with his team, to inform him of his plans, inform them of his plans going forward, and that's how Paul George and his camp have tried to spin it as like, our intentions were just to be transparent from the beginning. But if you're the Pacers, you're like, thanks, but no thanks. Like, you could have just told us that and not told everybody else, because then we could have known that we would have to get rid of you, but we would have some semblance of leverage, which they have none of right now. So you really don't know what to do if you're the Pacers, because you got to get rid of them, but who do you give them to, and who do you get back?
Yeah, Jeff Dickerson of Dickerson and Hood on ESPN Radio here talked about just how hamstrung the Indiana Pacers are by this.
This is a disaster for the Pacers. this report is a disaster for them. Because, number one, they're going to lose Paul George. Yes. They're going to lose their superstar. He's leaving the team after next year. Number two, it's been reported that he wants to join the Lakers as a free agent. So even if you do trade him before he becomes a free agent, what are other teams going to give you knowing that Paul George essentially is a one-year rental player? This is awful for the Pacers.
Jeff Dickerson, I have to imagine that's pretty emblematic of how Pacers fans have to feel coming off
disaster.
This. And if you are a Pacers fan, 888-729-3776. This guy has been probably your highest profile player for the longest time now. We remember had a lot of battles with LeBron James and those Miami Heat teams from earlier on, battled with LeBron James this postseason in the closeout game there. I think had 43 to LeBron's 41 in that final game. Drew a lot of praise from him and has really been the guy making this franchise a contender for the longest time now. How does that opinion change based on the way he's going out? I mean, how do you look at this guy that for so long you lauded, who's now put your franchise in a compromising position?
I think you just, if you're a Pacers fan, you now add yourselves to the list of fan bases that have been let down in a way by your favorite son. Like, you could call Cleveland and say, hey, what do you do when your guy just turns his back on you when LeBron went to Miami? Or if you call back to whomever has been a Nuggets fan for 10-plus years and say, hey, what did you do when Carmelo told your team that he was leaving and forced a trade? And so many other teams, so many other players have dictated what they want to do, which, by the way, I do not begrudge any player, any human being for having some willpower, some free will over his or her own future and his or her own employment, his or her own happiness, whatever you want to call it. Like, it's only because it's sports that we get up in arms about someone deciding where they want to work. But because it is sports and because we're talking about it on the radio, we have to have takes and fire them off. And my take is that Paul George leaving and doing so and saying that he's going to do so publicly has screwed the Pacers, and they just have to come to terms with that. And what they do now is anyone's guess. I say get whoever you can. Send him to the Cavs because you're not going to beat the Cavs anyway. Try to get someone back. Get Kevin Love and see what happens.
Ask and you shall receive. Let's go to Ryan in Indianapolis. Ryan, you're on First and Last with Mike Golic Jr. and Will Reeve. What's going on?
Hey, guys. Thanks for taking my call. What's the chances of this actually turning out well for the Pacers? He does say he wants to go to the Lakers, but what if he goes to the Cavs and he decides, whoa, we can do a lot of good things here, and the Lakers actually, going after Paul George and giving too much?
It feels like at this point the Lakers, and from everything we've heard, are so confident in Paul George wanting to be there that it would take a lot. Now, the Cavaliers, in turn, and you're right there, seem just as confident that their championship culture, that word that gets thrown around, could sway Paul George. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, that's already after this would happen. Nothing the Cavaliers are going to throw out there, in my mind, is going to be enough to sway the Lakers to make some sort of move when this is a guy that's been on record, and at least from what they've heard, that he wants to be in Los Angeles. They're not going to trade anything. They're not going to give up anything for them. I don't think that's in the plans for Magic Johnson and that crew.
Right, because the Lakers aren't going to contend this year, so it's not like, oh man, we're Paul George away from knocking off the Warriors. You have the number 2 overall pick, which is great, and then you just use your young guys. They have another year of maturing and working together, and Luke Walton has another year under his belt as head coach, and then Paul George wants to come your way the year after when your players will be feasibly a little bit better and your team's a little bit closer to contending. Like, you stay put if you're the Lakers. If you're Magic Johnson, you just chill. But if you're other teams who know Paul George is out there, you have to at least consider the ways in which you can acquire him, knowing that you have leverage over the Pacers because Paul George is going to leave. You're throwing out, you're starting low. You're going to lowball the Pacers if you're another GM who wants Paul George. And you might have to come up a little bit because the Pacers aren't just going to give him away for nothing, at least not at this point, I don't think, because they could make Paul George just play the season out and be really awkward for everybody, but it's not out of the realm of possibility, even though you do want to get someone back in return. Maybe you give him away as a rental at the trade deadline or something, but what do you do if you're another team? I think you just lowball and see what happens because there's nothing to lose.
I think that guy brought up or started to bring up another possible point, which is if you do trade him to Cleveland and he does buy into the winning culture, now you've strengthened your biggest rival in your conference for possibly the near future. So this could be a double whammy for the Pacers. Is there any part of you that says, well, we'll just let you play out this year. If you're going to go to the Western Conference anyway, that's fine. We'll let you play out this year. Maybe you make an All-NBA team, and then we can still offer you a boatload of money, and now you're really going to have to make a decision. And if that decision is to go to the Western Conference, that's fine. At least you're not around us, and you're not hurting what we're trying to do.
Yeah, but then you're still getting nothing in return. I think that becomes the ultimate problem, doesn't it?
But that's what I'm saying. Like, is the nothing in return still somehow better than giving the Cavs or the Celtics an asset that's going to beat you for the next half a decade?
I understand that, but at the very least, if you get a guy like Kevin Love, who we saw in this situation when he was in Minnesota as the lone banana that was out there putting up double-doubles every time and being a perennial all-star and doing all of the things that we saw him do there, you can do that in the Indiana role, and you at least, because the part of this we always forget is not every team is, at this point, a contender, not even close. There's maybe 3-4 teams tops. Everyone else is trying to just put out a product that's still going to bring fans in. Like, at some point, you still have to entertain the people that are there. And when you leave it to just Lance Stevenson and co, like, is that really going to do enough to still give you? Because at the very least, they've had a confident product.
But you think, like, Kevin Love's going to put butts in the seats?
I mean, I'd be interested to see what it was like in Minnesota, because he was a guy we still talked about on the national scene a lot when he was in Minnesota because of how good he was in that solo act there.
Well, somebody's got to get stats.
Well,
on a bad team.
You get stats, but that was enough to make him a lead to where Cleveland acquired him in that big three. We went, oh wow, they acquired Kevin Love, Mr. Double Double, the guy from our SportsCenter commercials.
What do you think about Paul George just sitting out this year? Like, he's already lost a year to a horrific injury. Who's to say that something like that couldn't happen again? It's a lame duck year anyway. If you're him, you might as well. If the Pacers aren't going to trade you and everyone, like, all parties know that you're leaving, at least consider it, right?
I think there might contractually be some issues there. You'd still like to get paid for this season. And I think that's something that
I'm just throwing the idea out there.
Yeah.
That one's free, Paul.
We might be reaching too deep into the tank bin on that one necessarily, but
the tank bin?
Tank bin. Yeah, tank bin.
Also a tank bin. You're tanking your own season, but hey, protect yourself from it. I don't know. Just a thought. I don't know how it all would work, like the specifics and the logistics. That's not what I'm here for. I'm just here to introduce the idea, and then you guys tell me I'm wrong, and then I move the goalposts.
Thank you for listening to the First and Last podcast. You can listen and subscribe to all ESPN podcasts in the Listen tab of the ESPN app. First and Last.